right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Skirmish Line with I Stand With Cops. We are joined by two great guys that have done amazing things in this field for bringing more of us to this topic and helping us understand it. First, we've got Bob. Bob, can you tell the viewers a little bit about yourself?
Hi, Bob Kroll, President of the Police Officers Federation of Minneapolis. I represent 900 of the working men and women of the Minneapolis Police Department and Minneapolis Park Police Department. I'm a lieutenant with the job, 31-year veteran. That's about all.
All right. And Travis?
24 years on the Federation board and the last 5 as president of the board.
That's fantastic. I think you're being a bit modest because you've done some really exciting work in this field, and we'll get into that here in a little bit. Travis, tell the viewers about yourself. I'm sure you need no introduction to most of the people that'll be watching this, but tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, Jared, thanks for having me. It's certainly an honor to be here, and it's an honor to have Bob here. And before I get started, I'll just say right now, Bob Kroll is my hero. I may even have a little bit of a man crush on him, so I'm a little bit intimidated right now. But I've been a Tulsa police officer for 27 years. I'm currently a commander there. I'm not here in that capacity. I'm here as a civilian, an author. I've wrote a book called The Courageous Police Leader, a survival guide to combating cowards, chaos, and lies. And currently about to complete my second book on civilian review boards. And, I've trained law enforcement in 47 states, 3 countries, and I've talked to thousands and thousands of cops. And we all have the same issues. We all deal with the same enemy, so to speak. And unfortunately, they're not all criminals. And I'm just honored that you've put this together, Jared, and we have a platform to talk about some of these things that maybe can help law enforcement around the country.
Fantastic. I'm really excited. If anybody hasn't seen Travis's first book, The Courageous Police Leader, I highly recommend it. And Travis, I'm really excited to see your second book. If it's anything like your first one, it'll definitely be hard to put down. It'll be a page turner. Let's talk about
I echo that.
Yes. Let's talk about this police oversight a little bit. Bob, you were the first one out of the 3 of us to kind of deal with this. Can you give the viewers a broad overview of what went down in Minneapolis?
Well, sadly, this dates back to, my second year in police work here. We had, obviously back in the 80s, we had internal affairs, and I'll never forget the city council. For those of you that don't know about Minneapolis, we are extreme left-wing city government here. I'll never forget the city council meeting where they announced that we were going to have what then in 1990 or maybe 91 was a civilian review authority. Basically, they are going to invest in civilians with no training in the backgrounds of what we all do is going to investigate police officers and determine if their conduct on duty was authorized or within policy or not. So we, of course, back then, we filled the city council chambers with, hundreds of cops at the time, and something that sadly I don't think we could pull off today. But that's another whole other topic in policing. But anyway, sitting in there, and after this, we marched out and go, well, that's it. That's the death of police work in 1990 or 91. This is it. We're not going to do anything anymore. And the cops basically tried to shut down for about 1 shift. But in our nature, we don't operate that way, and rolling around listening with my partner that shift, we're going, how long can you do this for? And not any longer. And next thing you know, you're in a foot chase running through backyards after some guy with crack or whatever it was back then. So it didn't last long, but they come and go, these things. What we've learned there, the Civilian Review Authority and the activists behind these types of things burn out and wear out when they don't get the results that they want. And that is bring the next guilty cop in here, no matter what the circumstances are, Fortunately, with the civilian review that we had and now that it's morphed into what we call the Office of Police Conduct Review, they've changed it because the activists weren't happy. They've changed the process a little bit, but the concept remains the same. You've got civilians investigating police officers for doing their job without our training and experience. It's It's basically no different than our internal affairs. Here we have binding arbitration, and any discipline, that's where it ends up in. Sadly, in police work, the harder you work, the more trouble you get in. As we know, there's cops out there that put the blinders on and never have any kind of contact and never have altercations, never have complaints. I think the three of us don't represent that. But, the unique part about our job, the harder you work, the more trouble you get into sometimes. But in the end, the process remains the same. And the key takeaway for us is we've never given up the chief's final authority for discipline, which is key. You got to have a sworn LEO in that position to determine if discipline is warranted or not. And along with that, his command staff. It's not in the hands of civilians. The investigations can be done any way they want, but we still have Loudermill hearings for disciplinary panels, the opportunity for the Federation rep and the officer to state what was wrong in the investigation, dispute facts, or what was not investigated. So we can still kind of guide a fair investigation. And in the end of the day, it's binding arbitration. If we need to bring our case before an arbitrator, we're well versed in doing that and overturning discipline in a lot of cases for biased or ineffective investigations. So that's my long answer, guys. Sorry.
Well, I've got a couple of quick questions about that. How is your civilian oversight chosen? How are those people selected?
Sadly, it's just political appointments. It is the qualifications. Leave them at the door. Currently, we have it's an interesting cast in the Office of Police Conduct Review. We have a former FBI agent. We have a retired police officer from California who was a motorcycle cop in a small agency, and we have a lawyer that never really achieved their hopes and dreams in the world of attorneys. But so that's what we've got on those three. But you guys, I've seen them come and go over the years. There's been a whole trade-off. Of course, there's always your lawyer that floats through there for a while. And your investigations, that the job is that we have as union reps is if the investigation wasn't complete, state what was missing. If things are inaccurate, bring them out. So, it used to be back in the day, again, I've been doing the union stuff for 24 years. You'd go in and sit down in an IA interview with a guy for 20 minutes and you're out of there. And now, you got to review the body camera footage, which has been a godsend for officers. I believe it clears us in 95+% of the time. But that's who's in there, but they're appointed by the mayor and or city council. So, and again, It's a very anti-law enforcement city council we have in this city, unfortunately.
But Bob, when you brought in this civilian oversight, it reduced lawsuits and reduced the crime rate, and officer happiness and satisfaction went up, and
crime went down.
Went down.
Right.
It was a great thing, wasn't it?
It did none of the above. And just to kind of dovetail with the lawsuits. I mean, and I'm your classic consumer of these. I've had 54 complaints filed against me over my 31 years, and I'm still here. I'm still a lieutenant. I've been disciplined, but none of it has ever been upheld. I've been sued 11 times, and oftentimes when they chose to fight them, they've zeroed them out. But sadly, in this city too, they're big into opening the checkbook, just doing cost analysis. What's it going to cost to fight? And my experience there has been there's cities around us that, vigorously defend officers. And guess what? The ambulance chasing attorneys aren't knocking at your door once a week with their handouts saying, give me money and I'll go away. So that's a different dynamic too. But our city has been known to write checks, and they've been writing some big ones recently for purposes that never should have been written off, justifiable shootings and things like that involving officers. There have been some very bad ones given out.
Well,
that's a whole story for another show, you guys.
Yes. Well, I'm going to turn it over to Travis. Travis, is that an anomaly or is that the standard? Are we seeing that these things make things better, or do they make them worse?
Yeah, Jerad, I cannot reiterate this enough. I've looked at this pretty extensively, and of course, so what was attempted and still being attempted in Tulsa sort of drove my motivation for that. And because quite frankly, I didn't know a lot about civilian oversight. And my fear is that there's a lot of people listening to this around the country that don't know a lot about it that's in the profession, because we have really between 100 and 200 departments out of 18,000 that have some form of civilian oversight. And Minneapolis is, they were well ahead of the curve. There's only a few cities that have had these for 20, 30 years. And so we can look and see what's happened in those cities and really determine whether it's doing what it does. And I cannot say this enough. This is the most dangerous thing that's ever come our way. Okay, we said that about consent decrees. We said that about body cameras. We said that about all the activists demanding policy changes and all the crazy things that have come our way. By the way, body cameras were not crazy. The same people asking for those are now saying get rid of them because it didn't show what they wanted to show. But out of everything, this is the end game, Jerad. To the activists, this is their Super Bowl. This is what they want to get to. And when you dive into the history of civilian oversight and the organizations behind it, it is not anything close to the majority of your communities. In fact, it's anywhere between 5 and 10% of the communities, sometimes less, that are the loudest, the ones that have been making these demands for years. And you got to go back, let's just go back to 10 years ago when the first demands came, change your use of force policy and do the de-escalation, which we've been doing for years. And now we need body cameras, and now we need more community policing, and now we need, different training. Now we need unconscious bias training. All this stuff that's come our way, it hasn't done anything they said it would do. So this is the next generation of demands. But the difference is this is the end game, and this is the most dangerous, because when you look at the organizations behind it and you dive deep enough, they want the elimination of law enforcement. I would encourage your audience to look at what Campaign Zero is saying and some other organizations out there. You have organizations, strong organizations, not strong by people, but strong by voice in departments like Oakland and Portland. They literally are training their communities to never call law enforcement. They're trying to take powers away from law enforcement to end law enforcement. Now, here's the catch with civilian oversight. They can't come out publicly and say, we don't want police anymore, because they know that the 85% of the people in the Gallup poll that have high confidence in law enforcement would go nuts. They would freak them out. But it's a sleight of hand. By doing civilian oversight, they get to start stripping away law enforcement and their power and their authority. And they do it in some really wild ways. They started off doing it by, just like Bob mentioned, this will reduce use of force. This will make departments, well, it hadn't done any of that, because once again, it wasn't law enforcement that was wrong. All these changes in recent years, deadly force by law enforcement has remained exactly the same, because the behavior of suspects have remained exactly the same. So it didn't do any of that, and that's fallen on deaf ears. And once again, you can measure that. But now the sleight of hand and the trickery, which by the way is pretty smart, this is what they are now saying in communities, because you look at all the top 100 cities in this country, there are people talking about civilian oversight in all of them. They just don't have them yet, but it's coming. And this is what they say. We need civilian oversight because public trust is eroded. Now, here's the key with public trust, Jerad. You can't measure effectively public trust. That's an emotion. That's a feeling. If you don't trust me, there may not be anything I can do to make you trust me. Even if I'm the most professional and the best law enforcement in the country, okay, you have to make the decision to trust me. And so they know this, right? And so they're using this odd emotion and feeling to go, we need this. And they're assuming that civilian oversight improves public trust. Now, Minneapolis has had civilian oversight, since Bob said, since the early 90s. So I'll just ask you, Bob, how's the public trust in Minneapolis after 35 years of civilian oversight?
Well, the thing is, and you totally nailed it in every aspect of what you just said, Travis, but one part that really struck is it is such a small minority of the community, yet extremely vocal and volatile part of the community that pushes this. And you're never going to make those people happy. Right. You no matter what you do, unless it's bring the next guilty cop in here, let's execute him or fire him or whatever they want done. Facts be damned with this people and the agenda that they have. Now, if you go out into our ordinary neighborhoods, you'll find people that, I mean, our officers, the community engagement has been second to none. They know we're getting a bad rap, and particularly like our north side is a predominantly black community. You go there, they're buying cups of coffee. They're going, hey, you got a tough job. We're back. Don't believe what you hear. These advocates for the self-appointed advocates for the community don't represent the community. So as a whole, we are very well supported. However, this small squeaky wheel we talk about has the ears of the local politicians, and they think that, in our city council is 13 people, and they think their job is the ultimate oversight of police. They never mind all the other problems we have in the city with regard to roads and bike lanes and those kind of things that we have. What we have great need for is bike lanes in Minneapolis, by the way, you guys. It's crazy here. But no, we do have broad-based support, but that little segment we're talking about will never allow you to believe that's truly the way things are.
And Jerad, let me caution your audience, because a lot of your unions and a lot of your departments they will accept civilian oversight as long as it's a small fraction of that. Maybe it's just an advisory board, and maybe it's kind of getting a foot in the door. But here's what you see departments that have done that. And Chicago is a great example. Chicago's had civilian oversight for the last 25 years, and they've changed it about 5 times, making it stronger because they're not getting the results they want. And the latest proposals are the strongest of the strong, right? Subpoenaing officers, complete control, complete authority. So they're, like Bob said, this group of people will never be happy. And so even if a department thinks they're winning by getting a lesser form of civilian oversight, they need to understand that in the years to come, mission creep will happen. They will not see the results. And so so instead of going, hey, this isn't working, let's stop doing this, they're going to keep increasing the power of civilian oversight to the point to where law enforcement is not law enforcement anymore.
Yeah, and with that being said, Travis, with your research, you've looked at departments all over America that are dealing with this. Where has it been successful?
It hasn't. I'll be honest with you, Jerad. I actually do believe that there is a right way to do civilian oversight. It's not oversight, but we should include our civilians in law enforcement. But it's not in the fashion it's being sold. And I'm going to recommend that in the book. But I'm not sure there's anybody in the country that has done this, because the demands, like I said, the demands are either coming from this quasi-public trust issue, which Gallup has blown that out of the water. It's not true. Or they'll take a single isolated incident, and in the case of like Sacramento, a legal justified shooting where nothing happened, and use that to radically change the way the department does business, or the entire state does business, in the form of that case right there. And so it's a lie. It's a scam. And unfortunately, they're playing the long game, Jerad. This is not going to stop anytime soon. This is going to be a long, hard-fought fight. But if we care about our communities, we must be prepared for this. That's one of the reasons that I'm doing the research and writing the book, is I want to prepare people for this. But here is one thing that I think your communities can listen to, and I think it worked in Tulsa for now. If you overlay violence in America on a map and you plot it, guess what is in those cities that have the highest violence in America? You guessed it, civilian oversight. And here's the problem. They pitch it like it's an accountability tool for law enforcement. Well, who's holding the civilian review boards accountable, Jerad? Nobody. Right. It's a free-for-all. And then you get to the point of Oakland, where the civilian oversight board fired the chief because she wouldn't take the recommendations. And that's the key. Bob talks about that in Minneapolis, it's just recommendations. Well, he's fortunate that he has a strong union state with binding arbitration. But in states that don't have that, if you're a police chief, your leadership in law enforcement, it's not really a recommendation. If you want to keep your job, you want to keep your status, it's not they sell it to the community like, we know we're civilians, we're only giving recommendations. But in reality, it's not recommendations. It's carte blanche authority, and no one's holding them accountable.
With that, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a quick commercial break. Tune back in here in a second. You've heard the basis of where this came from. Next, we're going to talk about how to fight it and how to defeat it. See you in a second. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning back in to the Skirmish line. We've got 2 great guys here and a lot more content to cover in a short amount of time. So we're going to go to Bob in Minneapolis. Bob, tell us how, now that you've got this, that you lessen the impact for your officers. What do you do on a daily basis to have to struggle with this to protect your guys?
Well, one, we make sure that officers, when they go to give statements, whether it's in our own internal affairs, and the citizen can choose the path. If they want a civilian investigation, they go to the Office of Police Conduct Review, they get a civilian investigator, or they can choose our internal affairs. The part about the OPCR process is, in the review process, we've got 2 lieutenants and we've got 2 civilians that sit on there to decide if there's merit to it or not. But to back up, when we go with an officer, we make sure they have a Federation representative attending with them to the statement that they provide. And after, we coach them, be truthful, but be brief and concise, and don't ramble on and those types of things, the basics for given statements. So, and a lot of it is just getting the officer how to verbalize the justification for their actions. And some of the greatest street cops out there can't put into verbalization why they did what they did, and they need a little assistance with that. After that, what we do is if they're going to go to discipline, we get the entire case, and you're entitled to everything that everyone said in that case, and you review it like you're studying for a college exam, right? You look through that part, and the officer involved does the same. Then you go before a disciplinary panel of our administration, and then ultimate decisions is decided by the chief, fortunately. But what we do there is point out any things that may have been omitted in the investigation, things that were mischaracterized in maybe the investigative summary. If there were witnesses that were missed, that's our opportunity to challenge points of the investigation that may have been done inappropriately, wrong, omitted, on and on. So we have that. And then our final thing is if discipline is excessive, our board meets, we discuss it. We've got excellent attorneys here that are our Federation attorneys, and we will challenge these things in arbitration. We don't take it lightly. Obviously sometimes officers do make mistakes. We will, eat the discipline, for lack of a better term, but most often we'll grieve them. And sometimes in the negotiation process, we'll settle with the administration. Other times we'll go full-blown arbitration, and we've got a very good track record.
So thank you very much for that, Bob. That's a good definition, I think, explanation of how to fight it once you've already got it and what it's like to deal with it. But Travis, can you give us just a little bit of information, what's being done in other cities to fight this when it's trying to be implemented?
Yeah, and I think that's the key, because the majority of departments, almost all of them, don't have it yet, but it's coming. I can't stress that enough. And you've got to be prepared before it comes, because these groups are pretty savvy. I mean, they know what they're doing, and they really use misinformation as their tool. And and it's an easy sell. I mean, if you tell the general citizen, hey, don't you want more accountability for your agency? Well, I mean, the answer is sure. That's why you see some of these city councils, if they don't just right out boldly just pass it like Phoenix just did, they'll send it to a vote of the people. That's what Chicago's looking at. That's what Nashville did. And because it's an easy sell, because the ballot doesn't say, hey, your city is about to turn into a top 10 violent city when you pass this. It's going to say, this is just for accountability. And that seems to make sense. But that's not what this is, Jerad. And so what you've got to do is you've got to educate your public. You've got to let them know what's going on. And unfortunately, we have cities like Minneapolis that have a long track record of what exactly happens in those cities. And one thing that speaks loud to the community is people want to be in a safe community. And if they think that something is going to make them more unsafe, hurt police services, they're going to back away from that. But you've got to come out hard. I mean, I cannot stress enough. You let this happen, especially if you let it go, change the charter of your city, or become some sort of mandate that never goes away, you are effectively losing your agency, and it's not going to get any better from there. Obviously, if you already have it, you're there, but the education is still important. You have to continually educate people of what's exactly happening, because law enforcement, there's more accountability in law enforcement, Jerad, than any organization on the planet. I mean, if people don't like what the police do, they can call the DA, they can call the FBI, they can call the DOJ. You've got supervisors, you've got chain of commands, you've got boards reviewing things, you've got body cameras. I mean, think about that. You're talking about we don't have enough accountability, and we're the only profession on the planet that wears a camera when we work, and that footage can be seen by anybody if they choose to see it through open records law. So it's really amazing what's happening, and it's something that right now it's really turning up. It's the next thing, but it's the last thing, and we cannot let it occur.
You got to be involved in politics too, guys. I think if you have an opportunity to influence the politicians and get them on your side, no matter what side of the aisle they're on, you got to have friends on both sides of the aisle. That's an effective way to shut these things down before they start, if you have the political clout to do so.
So, Bob, that is 1,000% spot on. That's absolutely my passion. I'm outside of the stuff I do with I Stand with Cops and the Skirmish Line. I'm the chairman of the local Tulsa Fraternal Order of Police and also a Tulsa police officer. And again, as Travis had said, all the things I express here as a private citizen, not reflecting on my agency or my organization. But with that being said, I run our political action committee. I started it up. I do the same thing with the state of Oklahoma with the FOP. In the past, I've been on the national FOP legislative stuff. And now with I Stand with Cops, we've started a national super PAC. So that we can go in and deal with some of these things. And I'll tell you, that's how we stopped it in Tulsa twice. We've won Act 1 and Act 2, and we're fixing to go into Act 3. They're getting signatures right now to take it to a vote of the people. And with the help of courageous leaders like Travis and the education that he does as a local media personality, he has a very large footprint, and he's helped us immensely in educating folks, things like this podcast. And thank you, Bob, for coming on and helping us with it and letting people know what it looks like down the road if they do accept this, or they can just Google Seattle or Nashville or places like that have dealt with it. But I'll tell you, you couldn't be more correct. The local newspaper here on Act 2, when they came back in, local newspaper ran an ad that said they had the votes. They had the majority of the city council. It was going to a ballot. And I went out and engaged, regardless of what party you're in. You know, here in Tulsa, the Republicans overwhelmingly support law and order issues. We do not see that out of the Democratic Party as much. Not saying that all Democrats are that way, but it's what we dealt with. We engaged them. They sent close to 14,000 emails on our behalf. That translated into between 300 and 400 phone calls per counselor. And even some of them had 50 people show up at their house knocking on their door because they didn't have phone or internet to talk to them, to tell them, don't vote for this. We stand with our cops. Don't do this. It was the largest amount of outpouring of interest for an issue some of these counselors had ever had, and one of them has been on the council for over 15 years. So we really mobilized a lot of people there. We had a local talk show host that's close friends with Travis, that Travis is on his show weekly. And I encourage people to check out that podcast as well. The Pat Campbell show here in Tulsa, Travis's segment every week is rocket sauce. I mean, it is electricity in a bottle. But with that, you couldn't be more right. You've got to build those relationships before the fight starts. You've got to cultivate those things with your politicians. You've got to cultivate them with your citizens so that when you need to turn your organization into a war wagon and weaponize it and go to war, you can. You know, our Facebook in Tulsa, we've built it. We've got 66,000 followers just in the Tulsa area. You know, we engaged those people. They started flooding the city council with phone calls, and we flipped our vote. You know, we took it from them being on the record in the newspaper saying, I'm voting for this, to the day of the vote, they came out and said no. And it wasn't because we were individually lobbying these people. It's because we turned it over to the citizens and educated them on what needed to happen and why we felt the way that we did. And when they understood the totality of the circumstances and what they were dealing with, and with great work by Travis, it broke in our favor. And I think if they get their signatures, and I think there's a chance they will, I'm hopeful that the same thing will happen again. Because people, when they understand this issue, they really don't want it. And they've got to be sold lies in order for this thing to pass, or people have to not be engaged. Travis, what are your thoughts about other things other agencies that are facing this can do?
Yeah, you know, I can't really add much more than what you already said. I mean, politically, cops don't like to get involved in politics. And the other thing is we sort of feel like we can't get involved in politics, but whether we like it or not, Jerad, this is political now. I mean, everything that we're doing is seen under a political lens, and you have to get engaged. You have to get in the arena because if you don't speak, they will speak for you. And that's nothing but misinformation and untruths. I mean, this is the greatest profession on the planet. Some of the best men and women on the planet do this job. It's an outrage of what's being said about them, what's being done to them. And there is a downward slope that we're heading down. and we've got to get ahead of this. And so whether we want to get involved or not, if you like a safe community and you like good progressive police departments, you've got to get involved. And of course, education is the key. It's always tough in a 24-hour news cycle, and people have short attention spans. But it's going to take some money. It's going to take some resources. It's going to take using some personalities in your city. But I can guarantee, I don't care what city you're in, even Portland, which is really racing after Oakland as being the worst city in America. Sorry, Bob, you've lost your first place there. Even in those cities, the majority of the public wants a safe community, and you've really got to hit that home. And the evidence is just clear. This does not make communities safer. It doesn't change law enforcement for the better, and it doesn't help your citizens. And one thing that civilian review boards do not do is they're not on the same page with law enforcement. Law enforcement's job is to enforce crime, to make things safer. There are no civilian oversights that do that. They're coming in behind the scene trying to keep that from happening, which is why we see the violence increasing in the cities that have it.
Right. So with that being said, one more thing I want to say about politics and fighting this. Every association out there, if you're watching this and you're a member of a union, a POA, a PBA, it doesn't matter. You need to urge your leadership to make sure you have two things. You have a limited political action committee that's a PAC that can give money directly to candidates. You can't spend it on issues. You can't go do stuff, but you can give it to the politicians to help them out. You cannot buy off politicians, but you can buy access. Number two is an unlimited political action committee. It's also known as a super PAC. And with that, you can use dues money, you can use corporate money, you can set it up to where you don't have to report who gives money to it, and you can use that to spend on issues, attack ads, whatever you need. When it's time to take the gloves off, an unlimited PAC is the way to go, and you are doing your members and your association a disservice if you don't have both of those stood up and ready to go. That's all I have. In closing, Bob, do you have any further thoughts, and how can people learn about your association?
Well, first, just to further one thing on Travis, what he mentioned is they are safe in their communities and utilize that. And proof is in body camera footage. We were all skeptical. It's there now. If that bad behavior is there, it would be on camera everywhere. So utilize body camera effectiveness to our advantage. We are at www.mpdfederation.com. We've got a whole online store, including Cops for Trump t-shirts. I'll put a plug in there. Was fortunate to meet the president when he was in town. He's a great supporter of law enforcement. That can't be denied. A lot of this mess started in the prior regime with the relationships with officers and perception. My email bkroll@mpdfederation.com, and it was a pleasure to be on with you guys. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. Travis, tell folks where they can learn more about you and your current book.
Yeah, it's really easy. You can go to stopcowards.com. And you can find the information on my current book and the book coming up there. But you can also go to Amazon and just type in The Courageous Police Leader. You'll see it right there. But, before I get out of here, I want to thank both of you guys, Bob, you and Jerad. You have done so much. I don't know if you know this, but you've done so much for not only your departments, but departments around the nation, because you're an inspiration to me. I know you're an inspiration to others. I shudder to think where we would be without you two gentlemen. So on behalf of me, and I know law enforcement that I speak to all over the nation, thank you so much for what you do. The results of what you're doing will resonate for generations. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Travis. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Skirmish Line. Please like and subscribe where you get your podcast. And don't forget to look down in the notes. We'll have a link to Travis's book. Tune in to the next episode. Thank you so much. Have a great day.